Hi everyone, welcome back to English 1302, week 11. Yep, week 11. I've almost finished grading your R3 outlines, and most of them are pretty good. There was one common comment that I've made on almost every single paper. You're trying to do too much. You're trying to cover too much ground. Remember, you've only got, what, 3 or 4, maybe 5 pages, so you can't fully explain the history of higher education in America. So you really want to narrow the focus. Let me give you a good example. This is from one of my in-class students, my Monday night students, and she did this all on her own. This wasn't coached or anything. She started off by looking at jobs in higher education in America, and she decided, okay, I'm going to look at faculty jobs or staff jobs or administrative. Okay, I'll narrow it down just to administration. Then she looked at all the administration jobs, and there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of ones she could have picked, but she decided to talk about university presidents, the president of a university. Okay, then she said, well, I can't talk about the job of every president of every university, so I'll narrow it down to just one specific university. She chose Baylor. So she's going to talk about the job of the university president of Baylor University, and she couldn't talk about everything there, so she narrowed that down to just the day-to-day role of Baylor University's president. And I thought that was a wonderful example of starting off with something very broad and just continually narrowing it down, drawing in the focus until you got something specific enough that you can fully develop it, fully explain it in just a few pages. So you want to do that on your paper. You want to just narrow it down just almost as tight as you can. It's really hard to narrow it down too much. The more specific it is, the better. And really, the easier it's going to be to write, and the easier it'll be to understand. Don't forget, your thesis has to clearly state the topic, and your topic sentences need to clearly support the thesis. Now, if I didn't make any comments on your paper, and the higher your grade, the fewer comments you're going to get. But if I didn't make any comments on your paper, then you're kind of locked in to what you submitted on the outline. But that's okay, because if I didn't make any comments, then it's good. You're good to go. If I made comments, you're probably going to want to go back and change your thesis or your topic sentences or your sources. That was the other most common comment. You really have to evaluate your sources carefully. If you'll use google.com/scholar, now there are lots of search engines out there just for higher education, just for college students for doing academic research. And you can use any of those you want to, but Google Scholar is the one I'm most familiar with, and for me it works the best. So let me encourage you to, unless you have a marked preference for some other reason, stick with Google Scholar for right now. But use that and look for different sources. And don't forget, sometimes on your search engine, when you're doing a search, if you'll just type in different keywords, or sometimes just the order of your keywords will produce different results. But this is a pretty wide open topic, and I don't think I've ever done a search for any aspect of this topic, even a very narrow one, without getting at least 500,000 hits. And again, you just need 3. Okay, 3 sources. But you do want to pick the best ones, and you decide which ones are best. You evaluate those sources based on authority, depth, timeliness, and citation. If it doesn't have an author, even if it's written by Harvard or the U.S. government or something like that, if it doesn't have an author, it doesn't have authority. Toss that one and find one that does. Timeliness, within the last 5 or 10 years would be optimal. Some of them go back a little bit further than that. Depth, they should be at least 10, 15, 20 pages. So journal articles are good, books are good also. And then citation. The only thing there is, does your paper cite other papers, or is it cited by other papers? It's not just, you really want to avoid blogs and pamphlets and encyclopedia entries and Wikipedia. Those are just too short, and they're just too self-contained. All research is built on other research, of course. So you want something that's connected to other research in the field. As you do the research, I hope that you're learning a lot about higher education in America. You've got a lot invested in your education, your higher education, your money, your time, your energy, your effort, and even though you're only moving through one particular aspect of it, we're all part of the same game. So I hope you're learning a lot about how higher education works. I would much rather you find something that interests you rather than something you think I want to hear. Because I've thrown out several different suggestions for topics, and you're welcome to write about whatever you want to, of course, as long as it's part of the assignment. But find something that you're interested in. Find something that appeals to you, that you want to learn more about. We finish up our reading of Robert Frost. I hope you've enjoyed his poems. And I really hope that you're following the advice on that very first PowerPoint I posted called Appreciating Poetry. Poetry is one of those things that it's really hard to get unless you're willing to work with it a little bit. If you just read it one time and go, I'm confused, welcome to the club. We all are. You got to read it several times. You got to think about it. Sometimes read it slowly. Sometimes read it faster. Read it standing up. Read it sitting down. Read it out loud. Read it to your dog or cat. But just read it multiple times and really think about it. If you're still lost, YouTube. Go to YouTube and find a good YouTube explanation of it. Wonderful source of secondary input about poetry. Next week, we start Emily Dickinson. And if you didn't like Robert Frost, you might really like Emily Dickinson. She's kind of like the anti-Frost because her poem is so experimental and so different. The one thing about Robert Frost, about his life, that really influenced his poetry, and there was a discussion post, and a lot of people picked a lot of different areas, and that's great, but one thing about him that really influenced his poetry was once he sold his grandfather's farm and he moved to England, he was this overnight success, just this overnight instant poet. Everybody in England loved his poetry. His book sold well in America, and so that instant success, and there's good reason for it, he's a great poet, but that influenced his writing in a lot of ways. Now, Emily Dickinson, on the other hand, only published a few poems, fewer than 10. She published 8, but a couple of them were reprinted. And so does that count as 8 or 10? But her big thing, the number one thing, be sure to read the PowerPoint, be sure to watch the videos, but the number one thing about the life of Emily Dickinson, she did not want her poetry published. She wrote it for herself. Her poetry is like her own personal diary, written in some sort of code, because she really never meant for it to be out there. She specifically asked that her poetry be burned when she died. Now, why she didn't do that herself, I don't know. But when Robert Frost wrote a poem, he would write it and then go by and revise it and change it up and improve it and make it easier for us to understand, for the reader to understand. When Emily Dickinson wrote her poetry, she didn't. She kept it very personal and very, very self-oriented. She didn't want other people to understand her poetry. It was just for herself. She didn't give any of her poems titles, for example. We just used the first line of the poem as the title, but that's not the same thing. So, yeah, kind of keep that in mind, that everything that she wrote is just, the most intimate meaning is going to be exclusively for her. Any meaning that we can draw out of it is going to be secondary. And then the week after that, the week before and of Thanksgiving, we're doing William Wordsworth. I think you'll like William Wordsworth. He's called The Walking Poet. Somebody in my Monday night class asked about Emily Dickinson, why is she called the Nun of Amherst? She wasn't a nun. She was religious, however, and she did go to a female seminary called Mount Holyoke, but she got invited not to come back after her first year. There's different speculations as to why. We may never really know. But I do encourage you to dig into her life a little bit, enjoy her poetry by reading it out loud, reading it over several times, looking up summaries or YouTube videos on it, and I think you'll enjoy it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me. Don't use Blackboard Messenger and don't reply to those emails that come from Do Not Reply. But email me, jfly@southplainscollege.edu, and I'll get back to you as quick as I can.